We're going to hear from Michael Flight, who's been in the real estate business for 40 years, and now he's combining blockchain technology with real estate. All right, Michael, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you on board.
Hey, Chad, it's great to see you again. And it was great seeing you a few weeks ago down in Louisville.
Yeah, look, we've crossed paths at, I don't know, probably a dozen conferences now over the last couple of years. And I was really excited to have you on because, one, you're a guru in the triple net industrial retail real estate space. You have a really long history in that I briefly wanted to go over. But then also more recently, like you're really into blockchain and tokenization of real estate and kind of leading the charge in that regard. So why don't we give the viewers maybe like a 30-second overview of kind of where your career started and where how you ended up where you are now?
Sure. And I'm going to correct you because I know just the sprinkling of things about industrial real estate, but
Okay.
I know a ton on retail real estate. So I've been in the commercial real estate business since 1986. I started out as a retail real estate broker. Went and worked for a national syndicator that had about 270 shopping centers nationwide in the United States back in the 1980s. We hit a recession that was kind of triggered by the savings and loan crisis, as you're one of those guys that keeps up on the economic thing. So, it was one of those, bad, consequences of, doing financial engineering. So, and then myself and some partners started Concordia Realty in 1990. We ended up partnering with a lot of large institutional investors. And so we've done everything from, 900,000 square foot enclosed malls. And we've done a lot of redevelopment of strip centers, including a lot of, in between like 80,000 square feet and 400,000 square feet was our sweet spot. And then, I really, tried to diversify our capital because one of my partners that was the connection with all the hedge funds and institutions, unfortunately, he went in for surgery and died on the operating table. So I realized how precious life was. And I realized that, we were kind of tied to one capital source. And the other thing, a lot of syndicators and real estate people think that getting into institutional real estate is the pinnacle. And it is in some respects because you can do really incredible stuff. But it's also like flipping houses on a giant scale because the way they raise their funds, you get into the funds, and by the time they're investing with you, they're like 2 years into a 5-year fund. And then they say, hey, can you execute this giant, redevelopment in 3 years? Like, no, I can't. And so we decided to diversify our capital base. And the other thing is that I really like, the relationship with individual investors. I have met so many fascinating entrepreneurs, so many fascinating people, so many people that are like just interested in freedom. And, as I always like to say, financial freedom is upstream of political freedom. It's upstream of every, freedom you have, because if you don't have control of your assets, if you don't have some way to fund it. So I'm enjoying life way more now that I've gotten involved with a lot of individuals that are highly motivated for financial freedom. And I've gotten involved with some of the people that I didn't even know this other non-institutional side of real estate even existed. So I know I've talked a lot, but the last thing I'll say is that, most of the people that I meet now have all come into it because they read Robert Kiyosaki's book. And I, then they say, well, have you read it? And I'm like, well, no, I was actually in real estate for about 15 to 20 years before the book came out. So I've never read it. But I do admire the fact that he's brought so many people out of Wall Street and into other assets that I believe are much better for them and create more wealth for them.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And no problem with it taking a while. You've been doing it for 40 years, so you got a lot to talk about. I get it. So where did, like, along that career path, at some point you started looking more into blockchain and perhaps cryptocurrencies? When did that transition happen? And what do you, let's just talk about that. When did that transition happen for you?
Well, I first heard about Bitcoin probably around, I can't remember whether it was 2012 or 2014. I was at a conference, and the conference is more of a free market conference geared towards poverty alleviation. And that was, put on by the Acton Institute. And so somebody had mentioned, oh, there's this, stuff out there called Bitcoin. And I just really, snuffed it off. And then, like, I started hearing, things about this over the next year or two. And so right around 2015, I told both my boys, who were, one was in college, I think, and one was in high school. I said, I don't know what this blockchain stuff is, but you need to know about it, because all of the smartest people that I've ever met in my life are talking about it. And these were like people that were way ahead of the time. And, and so I'm like, okay. And so then, move forward a little bit. Myself and some other people are, got involved with this startup country called Liberland, and it's in the middle of the Europe. And through that, I met some guys that were doing what's called an ICO, which is initial coin offering. And so it's, issuing cryptocurrency, and they were doing a real estate thing, and they needed somebody to advise them on the real estate. We took a look at, what they were doing. Their white paper had the word awesome in it 400 times, and these guys actually raised money. So I'm like, if these guys
Awesome.
could raise like $1 million too, off of like knowing nothing about real estate, just like throwing the stuff out there. I'm like, I need to investigate how to do this. And then I soon figured out that you can't do that in the United States because you're actually creating a security. So that's when we went off on our adventure to say, how do we create something like an ICO that will allow for, crowdfunding, direct community investment, and all kinds of other things, and give investors like all kinds of options. And so we ended up, and figured out that it's like, oh, there's this thing called security tokens. So it's basically real estate syndication, although the shares are tradable.
What year was Liberland?
Liberland is a startup country. I think they're going on their 8th anniversary.
Okay.
But it's this guy, Vit Jedliska, out of Czechoslovakia, that saw that there was an island in the middle of the Danube that was unclaimed land. So he just went and claimed it for Liberland. Country's on the blockchain, which is how I got contacted by a lot of people that were doing blockchain.
Okay. Perfect. I just, for a reference for timeline, was curious. So maybe you can take a step back. And I'm a techie guy, real estate guy, but I don't know much about blockchain or tokenization. That's why I wanted to get you on the show, because you're the expert. So maybe we could start at the 10,000 foot level, or maybe even 100,000 foot level, but super high. Maybe walk us through blockchain, what it is, and where do you see that starting to go with real estate? But we can start basic. Feel free to start basic.
Sure. Well, I always explain to people that, when blockchain works properly, they'll probably never know about it. Just like you don't know what happens when you press send on an email, that, there's this SMT server, and I just misdid the letters. Or you don't know what happens with the internet, which is TCP/IP protocol. So you don't care about any of that stuff. All you care about is, like, when you pull up a website, the website comes up when you hit send. So in the future, most people probably won't even, they'll know what blockchain is, but they won't care about it, because all they'll know is that I, have one asset and I'm trading it for another asset, or I'm, using Bitcoin to buy shares in an office building or something like that. But the 20,000, foot level view is that, just like the internet creates worldwide instantaneous communications, Blockchain allows for worldwide, almost instantaneous value transfer, asset transfer, or money transfer. And you say, well, I could do that now with a bank. And I will say, yes, but you have to actually have a banking relationship, or you have to have a relationship with PayPal, or you have to have a relationship with, MoneyGram. And then even though you hit send and theoretically it goes through, that transaction actually doesn't clear for a number of days. And in the case of, if you want, like, let's say you were over in Europe or something, and I wanted to send you a wire, the wires here theoretically show up, but the bank actually doesn't get the clearance, for like a day or two on that. And internationally, sometimes it takes up to 7 days to clear. So that, but if I sent you Bitcoin right now, probably definitely within 10 minutes, you would know that you had the Bitcoin. And so if we decided that I wanted to sell you my house for Bitcoin, it's a little bit more difficult. But if I put the contract up for my house in a smart contract and you sent the Bitcoin there, and as long as everything went through, boom, you would have title to the house and I'd have the Bitcoin that you paid for it. And that could theoretically be done in 10 minutes.
Okay. Now, what about the other pieces of the puzzle, like title and escrow and the different elements that we have within a normal transaction? Are all those folded into the same contract you referenced, or is that in different pieces of the blockchain?
No, that's all different pieces. So the longer term thing, and I'm working with a startup to raise money for them, but they are putting actual title on the blockchain, and they believe that with their solution in their marketplace, you could actually close a commercial building, in as fast as 3 days, but they wouldn't say that that's achievable right now. But you could definitely close that commercial building completely within 5 to 10 days. So, and all the information would be there. So, but the big thing right now is that you can't really do everything on blockchain. So when they say they're selling houses on blockchain, they're actually not selling the house. They're selling an LLC. So when you actually get the counties to agree to put the titles onto blockchain, then you'll have a lot more, number one, security, because somebody won't have to go to some musty county basement and go through all the records and say, oh, there's nothing clouding the title and everything like that. Number two, because the blockchain is just generally a giant ledger. And public blockchains, you can just actually look up all the transactions on the blockchain. So if somebody says they own, and the title is on the blockchain, and somebody says, I say I own that, and I say, Chad, I'm going to sell it to you, you can actually look up as to whether I actually own it or not. So, and if I have the keys to it, then I can actually, transfer it to you. And so that's eventually how everything's going to go, because blockchain solves a lot of record keeping problem, solves a lot of data problems, and it makes things much faster. What's going to be getting title on the blockchain slower is because there's a lot of political jobs there. There's the title insurance companies that make a lot of money off this stuff. It's probably going to affect broker commissions in some respect. There's other people that say brokers aren't going to have, anything. And I say, you always need somebody to sell something, regardless of, whether everything's automated. You still need, like the car salesman to sell it. You still need to, so I think some of the stuff can be done online. I don't think everything's going to go online though either.
Got it. So when you say something's on the blockchain, what does that mean?
So if you think about, so the blockchain is a series of transactions. So it's just basically like a giant Excel spreadsheet. And so every time a transaction occurs, the spreadsheet gets changed and it updates the entire set of transactions on the entire spreadsheet. With a blockchain, though, you can't go back and reverse any of those transactions. So once the transaction happens, that transaction is there and it stays there. And so that's what makes blockchain unique, is that somebody can't go back and then say, well, I'm going to respend this money, and then I can send you, I can send money to you, and I can send money to somebody else, because the blockchain verifies the transaction. And if the money was already spent, then it like kicks out the transaction. So being on the blockchain means that you're keeping track of the transactions. If you think like the blockchain are giant, like they're more like Verizon, you know, some of the larger public blockchains like Ethereum and that, they're like Verizon or they're like AT&T. They're giant, you know, networks that communicate value. So if you think about it that way, if there's a smart contract that attaches the title to the blockchain, that means the title is sitting there on the blockchain, kind of like it's riding on train tracks on top of there, and it's in a certain spot. And then once you and I decide that we're going to sell that particular piece of property, then that title is updated and it goes into a new spot on the blockchain with the new owners of it. So it just keeps track of things, kind of like a county recorder's office does, kind of like, you know, car title does, but it's all out there in the public, and, you know, things can keep track. Now, the one thing about blockchain is you don't necessarily have to have exactly what's out there. So if me and you had like a Dodge, you know, Charger or something like that, and we decided to tokenize it, and I decided to sell it to you, it could be just that there's a number out there in a transaction, but nobody could tell it was me and you or a Charger. It would just say there's this there. And then if you just like, so let's say you bought the Charger, then you decided to sell the Charger to somebody else, you could verify that you own the Charger and that it is a Charger, but it would be only with people that you wanted to transact with.
Okay.
So I don't know if we're going too far into the weeds or not, but the great thing about blockchain is it's going to make like title transfer, sending money faster. It's going to, you can represent value. So we're going to get really far into the weeds, and NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens, can represent artwork. They can represent cars. So it basically just shows title.
Got it. And so the blockchain being this digital ledger, I believe the idea is that it's decentralized, right? There's not one single entity that controls the blockchain. It's spread out over a bunch of different servers, so you can't go back and change something because it's duplicated everywhere, right?
Theoretically, on the larger public blockchains, there's people verifying the transactions, and it doesn't all go through a bank, or it doesn't all go through PayPal, or it doesn't all go through the U.S. government. Those transactions are, you know, verified independently between 1,000 to 20,000 different, you know, and once it gets verified, that all the people that are running nodes on the blockchain, they all update the blockchain. So there's like, you know, like on the Bitcoin blockchain, I think there's up to like 20,000 people running nodes or more. So that's all those 20,000 people are verifying the transactions. So you're not just depending on Chase to verify the transactions. And the other thing is that's great about that is that if you decide, if somebody decides that you have like opinions that they don't like, with the blockchain, there's not a group of people or one, you know, individual company that can decide, well, you can't transact here on those public blockchains. It's going to be completely different if the U.S. Issues a digital dollar, because they'll know everything you're spending your money on.
Yeah. I was gonna say, it sounds like some governments might be afraid of that. But we won't go there. Have you done any tokenization of real estate yet and traded it?
We haven't tokenized individual real estate. What we did was we put together a fund, Liberty Real Estate Fund, which was a triple net property fund. And so that's basically, we just tokenized the shares of the fund. So it's exactly like a normal 506c syndication for accredited investors. And so once they invested in the fund, their shares after a 1 year lockup period are tradable.
Cool. So
And
even
those
though,
shares can trade to accredited or non-accredited after the 1 year lockup period.
oh, wow, that's great. So it can still be 506c compliant, even though you might be having a non-accredited investor purchase it a year later?
Yes, yeah. So that's in the SEC rules. It's called Rule 144,
Okay.
and it's designed for tradable securities. So,
Wow.
but almost if you're doing any type of work in the United States with funds and you want to do the tradable tokenized real estate fund, you have to comply with SEC rules because these are securities.
Sure.
So, and then there's people out there that say, oh, we're tokenizing houses and stuff, and then they're giving returns. And it's like those are clearly securities and they're in violation of the securities laws.
Yeah.
So
As
that's
long
one
as they
of
didn't
the
file with the SEC, right?
right. They didn't do it properly because you
Yeah.
can do a tokenized regulation A offering. You can do a tokenized regulation CF offering. You can do a 506B or a 506C, or you can actually tokenize, full public offering like a REIT. Um,
Cool.
and there's different advantages and disadvantages to that too. But you need to, if you're doing this in the United States and somebody's getting a return on their investment, you need to issue it as a legal security. It's exactly the same. It's just that instead of having a paper certificate and the paper thing, you've gone to digital certificates. So it's basically like you had record albums when I think you were old enough to see records, and then you
Yep.
went to CD, and now you're at the everything is in your phone from the iPod to the iTunes. So it's just basically digital shares instead of paper shares. But the
Cool.
cool thing is, just like Napster changed everything with the digital music, this means that the digital shares can go here, go there, and do a lot more things with them.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is great. So, one of the hesitations of some people getting into real estate is that it tends to be longer time horizons and sometimes unknown horizons, right? Because it depends on when the GP team is going to sell, when's the optimum time to sell or whatnot, or trade. But with what you guys set up with the Liberty Fund, so because you have tokenized it, you made it a lot easier for people to buy a share and trade a share, and they can do that after a year. So, so if let's say I'm a early investor, I get in and I decide after 2 years I want to get out. So I can sell that and I don't need to go through you necessarily. I can go direct and just sell my token to someone else.
Well, there's different. I mean, there's complicated securities laws, so it's not quite that easy. If you had a cryptocurrency, or if you were outside the United States, it would be really easy because then I could show if I had $100,000 worth of shares and I wanted to get rid of $50,000, or you did, and I said I'll buy you, the 5 shares at 10,000 a piece.
Yeah.
As long as you put the shares up and I put the money up, the trade would go through. That's outside the United States. Inside the United States, anybody that is buying those shares has to be whitelisted because you can't be a bad actor. You can't be from certain countries and other things. So you have to go through in the United States what's called KYC, which is Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering. So, and it really depends on how the syndicator writes its operating agreement. But our operating agreement said, yes, you can sell and you don't need our approval. Or there's the other things that you can do. For example, I've got 2 children, so I could, if I had $100,000 of shares at $10,000 a piece, I could give my kids, one 30,000, the other boy 30,000, and then retain the 40,000, regular 40,000 for myself. So it makes the estate planning easier. Also, there's people out there and there's companies out there that if you have something a little more liquid and they know what the asset is, like let's say, for example, you do multifamily, right? So,
Yeah.
and you're raising and you're doing stuff in California and then in other markets. So let's say you bought something, in Long Beach. It was a beautiful building. You knew it was like, just going to be cash flow forever and all the rest of that. So you decided to tokenize that. So once you issued those security tokens and your investors had, like, let's say somebody had $100,000, and there's other lenders out there that'll say, well, I'm comfortable with the underlying asset there, so I'll lend you up to $50,000 on your $100,000 worth of shares. So you don't even necessarily, this gives you more flexibility, even without selling them.
Wow. So, okay, because that would never happen in a normal transaction, right? I can't say, hey, I own 10% of this LLC and then take a normal loan against that.
Well, there might be some people out there doing it, but it's insanely difficult to do,
yeah,
and it's insanely hard to value and all the rest of it. So tokenization of shares is set up to do that. And I do have to, like, once again, go back to, there's people actually tokenizing real estate, which is basically just putting the title on the blockchain. And what we're talking about right now is tokenizing shares of an investment in real estate.
Got it. Got it.
But actually, it makes things so the blockchain makes record keeping much easier. It makes paying people much easier. So you can actually have investments that are smaller size investments now. And so even if it's accredited investors, you can actually put it out there. It's like, oh, I could do $5 a share. I want to, have more people in there. And the blockchain record keeping part of it makes it easier to have smaller shares or get more people investing in real estate. So it really opens up real estate to a wider audience.
Got it. Okay. So, and if we have like tokenization of an LLC that controls a property, and going back to my example, the person that wants to exit in 2 years, is there a third party marketplace that's valuing that price of the tokenization, or is that done between the buyer and seller individually?
Well, right now there's things called ATSs. So they're automated trading systems. So they're basically like matching systems. And my partner hates it when I say this, but it's kind of like a Tinder for stocks. So, and if you like it, you swipe right and you get your shares. So, and you got to put the money up. So, but right now there's not a whole bunch of places that are specifically set up for real estate. So my partner and I, Courtney Moeller, have put together and we're putting together a marketplace for alternative assets, specifically real estate. So, what we're doing right now is onboarding, close to 300 sponsors onto this marketplace. And once we get fully licensed and regulated towards the end of the third quarter of this year into the fourth quarter, the tokenized shares that have been tokenized in the past will be able to trade on there. So individual investors will be able to go on, buy shares in, with the sponsors that are up there. Also, regulated securities brokers and people like that will be able to go in and sell, shares of different investments to their clients. And it also will be like a matching engine, so that, as different general partners and different sponsors like to, sometimes do co-investments and things. So it'll have a matching engine if somebody's looking for additional equity or additional debt.
Is that the Invest on Main program that you're working on?
That is Invest on Main, and the website that the marketplace will be is iom.ai.
Cool. I just signed up this week.
Yes, you did.
I think I'm going to have a call with your son Massimo pretty soon about that. But yeah, I just signed up CSQ Properties on there.
Yeah. So definitely, as usual, like any type of software development and any type of construction development, things go a little slower than you expect. So, but we should start onboarding people early next week. So
got it. Okay, cool. So going back to the ATS platforms you mentioned, and Invest on Main being kind of this marketplace that you and Courtney are creating. Courtney's amazing, by the way. Is there the possibility that this investor could determine the price with the purchaser individually, and they just come up with their own price on what this token of the LLC is going to be worth?
They could, but there's like securities laws in the middle of it. But yes, they could, do something and say, I'm, interested in doing a side sale here. And so that could go through, but it would have to go through, as a regulated, they'd have to be, so the one investor would have to already have the know your customer anti-money laundering checks done. And then, that trade can go through.
Got it. Okay.
But and then our marketplace is going to be open so that if there's a number of different ATSs, which are kind of like mini exchanges. So it's going to be open so that if somebody wanted to list on, another exchange, they could. And so what we want to do is just facilitate the growth of this.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, look, you're really at the forefront of creating this industry, which I think is really cool. What do you see as like some of the near term challenges or biggest hurdles that you're dealing with in terms of adoption of this technology and rolling it out?
One of the biggest things is just, trying not to stress the technology part of it and just make the customer experience, easier. So right now, if somebody wants to buy tokenized shares of something, they need to open up what's called a wallet. And so if they're on the Ethereum blockchain, most of them open up like a MetaMask wallet, which, I have a motivation to do this, and I have, some of the technical skills to do it. It still took me like 2 days to like figure out how to do a MetaMask wallet. So that's going to be one of the bigger things. It has to be like easy and seamless that people actually don't know they're, on, anything that looks like cryptocurrency. And where I see a lot of the tokenization projects going wrong is they try to be cryptocurrency forward. They're like, oh, look at us, we're cool and we're technology and all the rest of that stuff. But in order to get wider adoption, real estate investors don't want to do that. And we found that out the hard way with our fund. It's like there is a tremendous amount of education. So if we just go with these are tradable shares of syndications, just like you've been doing all along. And oh, by the way, you get your own account, and your account, follows you no matter where you are in the world. Versus, I have to do a wire from if I'm living down in Costa Rica when I retire, I have to do a wire every time between the United States. It's like, no, it's like wherever that account is, which is what, we call a wallet. But if you or I are living in Costa Rica and the properties are up in the United States or the properties are over in Europe and they're kicking off the cash flow, it just goes directly to you. It doesn't really matter where you are in the world.
Yeah. So does all that assume that the transaction happened with some sort of cryptocurrency? You had mentioned Bitcoin earlier, but does it have to be a cryptocurrency based transaction to get the tokens?
No, you can get your payments as ACH payments, which are, direct deposit into your bank account. If you really want the type of freedom that I was talking about, you could get your money issued in a stable coin. So USDC is a stable coin, so it's matched dollar for dollar. And then basically you are now on the blockchain rails of the system. And so at that point, your money kind of follows you everywhere else. If you do the ACH payment, it's going to go directly to a bank, and it's more than likely going to have to go to a bank in the United States or in the country, that where you're at. And then you're going to have to make some jumps to go there. But if you decide that you want to take your payments as USDC, or, at some point it could be in Ethereum, it could be in Bitcoin or anything like that, you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, some of the payment processors will now, make those payments also in cryptocurrency.
Got it. it seems like in order to increase the adoption of some of these technologies, it might require a hybrid approach, at least in the interim. I mean, a lot of people are hesitant with FTX and Celsius and some of these other big name fiascos that are happening in the crypto world. I think get a lot of people nervous, especially some of the later adopters nervous. I'm not sure we're at that stage yet, but aside from the early adopters or the visionaries, once you get beyond that, I just see that there needs to be some sort of hybrid approach because people are really nervous about some of this stuff. Like, and you're talking about real estate. I mean, it's like you're like as concrete as you can be, like hard assets, real estate, right? Tried and true versus something on the totally opposite end of the spectrum, cryptocurrencies, digital, very different.
And let me just address this because this is not cryptocurrency. This is just it runs on the same rails as cryptocurrency, but it's fully regulated. It's, a hard asset. It's definitely not cryptocurrency. And then I would like to address the FTX thing. That was just outright fraud and theft. So, and that guy was regularly meeting with the director of the SEC, and they couldn't, so what kind of regulations do you have if the guy's in the offices of the SEC and just doing this major fraud and theft? Yeah. So, that could happen to you in any other investment, just like Bernie Madoff. So yeah. You always, you as an individual, whether you're investing in a stock, a mutual fund, or a company or a real estate investment, you just need to know, who you're investing with, or you need to rely on somebody that, can thoroughly, properly vet, what you're investing in. So, but again, backing up, this just runs on the same rails as cryptocurrency, but is definitely not cryptocurrency. This is like some of the most staid investments that you can get involved with. I would argue that there's way less volatility and way more benefits to owning cash flowing real estate than it is being, in the stock market or the S&P 500 fund.
Yeah, I'd agree. And that's why I was asking the question, do you have to purchase the tokens with crypto?
No, no,
you don't. So that was my direction there I was going.
So like I said, that the on-ramp to this is it's exactly the same as if you were investing in a normal syndication. The one great thing about, this platform is you can invest with a credit card, you can invest with a debit card, you can invest as an ACH payment, you can wire the money in, or you could buy it in crypto.
Got it. Okay.
So it just gives the investor way more flexibility with how they invest in things and what they do with their, money and their wealth once they get it.
Yeah. What part of the technology would you say, or results of the technology are you most excited about in the near term?
I'm most excited about the fact that I believe that the United States is probably going to be slower in adoption than the rest of the world. The rest of the world, this is like going to be really good for the rest of the world. So, for example, with Liberty Fund, we had a U.S. fund and a non-U.S. fund, and we had the most interest in our fund from people from Turkey, people from Argentina, people from Venezuela, people that don't have sound money. So even though I don't believe the dollar is really sound money anymore, if your currency is depreciating at 50% and you can't even tell, it's like what a miracle that you could actually like invest in cash flowing real estate where that dollar for dollar that your money is probably going to stay there. Plus you're going to get like extra cash flow from it. You're going to actually have an asset that appreciates, and you're going to have an asset that gives you cash flow. So, and the great thing about this is that from the non-U.S. investor standpoint, it's kind of like putting their money into a money market fund that's backed by real estate. So you get like the benefits, and they were very interested because it's like one of the safest places in the world to invest in real estate, and the largest market by far is the United States. So,
got it. Okay.
But I think it's going to be life-changing for a lot of people around the world, especially going back to how I originally got introduced to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. I was at a poverty alleviation conference. And so if you're talking about somebody in South America, or you're talking about somebody in Africa, and they don't have clear title on their land to actually borrow against, if they could put their money in like into this and then be able to borrow against this, or if eventually their title could get put onto the blockchain, and then other people from different parts of the world could actually say, yeah, I want to invest in that. I want to, I'll, lend, $20 on, this parcel of land that I know is there in the middle of Nigeria. So I think it's going to just open up a lot of, credit for people. I think they're actually going to be able to use their wealth and create more wealth. So if they could borrow against a hard asset to then go out and expand their business, it's just, I think this is going to create a lot of human flourishing. And I'm very interested in creating human flourishing. And I know with the amount of kids that you've had, you're really, populating the world with human flourishing. So,
oh man, I'll tell you what. After 5 kids, I put the brakes on it already. I've done my fair share.
I know you're making up for us slackers. So I'm thanking you for that.
Yeah. One by one. So yeah, that's exciting, and especially with, you had mentioned earlier, tokenization, the price per token could be quite a bit lower. You're not dealing with $100,000 minimums or something like that. You could actually bring it down a fair amount and make it more accessible to people.
You could. So most people are going to run their investment business the way they want to run their investment business. So people that are used to taking $100,000 investments, they probably won't change that. There's other people that might say, hey, I want to open up a certain percentage of this. For example, like a Grant Cardone, when he did his 506c raises, but then he did a few Regulation A raises, because he's got a following that it's oh, I'll bring you into my investments because I've got this large following that can't get into these other accredited investments.
Yeah. Okay, cool. One last question before we start wrapping it up on the blockchain real estate summit that you helped start a couple years ago. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, as we're talking about here, a lot of people were unfamiliar with this technology. A lot of people were unfamiliar with how this happens. And so, just like they said in Animal House, we need to do something incredibly stupid. So we decided to put together a conference to explain what blockchain real estate is, how it works, and all the rest of it. And so we had two, both in September. The first one was September 2021. The last one was September 2022. Those were in Austin, Texas. And this year it's going to be in Florida, more than likely Orlando, Florida. And I think the dates on it are September 27th through the 29th. And so if somebody was interested in learning how to issue a security, where our partners with this are Fibri. They're an international organization. And so they have people that are, internationally known in doing real estate title on the blockchain and all kinds of other things. So it's going to be a much more international conference this year. It's going to be great. We've got a really good speaker lineup. So that's primarily for the education part of it. So if you really want to get out in front of, everything's going to in the real estate business is more than likely at some point going to be on the blockchain. As I said, you're just not going to know it, but property management, rent payments, and all the rest of that stuff is going to be flowing on the blockchain through those payment systems and, the record keeping part of that. So if you want to learn more about that, September 27th through the 29th, blockchainrealestatesummit.com.
Cool. We'll add that in the show notes as well. And if people wanted to learn more about you or Liberty Fund, how can they get in touch with you guys?
Well, they can get in touch with us. They can go to Invest on Main. And if they want to learn more about real estate tokenization and how it works, we've got a report there on the Invest on Main website. So it's investonmain.com, and just hit the report button. And we've got a beautifully illustrated report that goes through, kind of shows, how blockchain is the internet of value, and explains some of these key concepts and how you might, go about doing some of this stuff. And then they can contact me at the contact page at Invest on Main, or the contact page at Blockchain Real Estate Summit.
Okay, great. Yeah, I actually had downloaded that report a while back, and it was really helpful. Very well done, by the way.
Proud to say that all the pictures were taken by me. So
It was great. It was a good report, very thorough. So this has been super helpful. Thanks for helping to educate me and hopefully a few of our listeners along the way. Really appreciate it. And as always, I'm probably going to see you at the next conference very soon here.
yeah, I always look forward to seeing you. We've had some great times. Really enjoy being around you. Really enjoy your investment philosophy and how you just want to give people value, and the financial freedom aspect of it. So it's been really great, and really looking forward to hearing this one. And thank you very much for inviting me here. I mean, it's a real honor,
Yeah.
because I know most people don't know this about Chad, but Chad is a real TV star. So
Yeah, that's my side hustle. It's TV hosting work. So no, I appreciate that, Michael. And I'm sure I'll see you pretty soon at another Real Estate Guys event here in March, I believe.
yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Michael. Hopefully that gives you a glimpse into the future of what it looks like when you can combine real estate with tokenization and blockchain. I'm super excited for what the future holds, and real estate is definitely going to be a part of it. If you like what you saw, please push subscribe down below and drop us any comments. Feel free to connect with us. Thanks a lot.